Alright, we're starting at the top. We talk about limiting subjectivity. He says the solution to this is that, well, everyone's screened. The problem is that we inherently live different lives. If my dog died when I was 10 and it was a major traumatic experience for me, and someone wrote an English essay about their dog dying, it's liable to affect me more than someone that, let's say, wrote about a football game that they did when they were supposed to exhibit their writing. The whole problem is that we have voices within our writing and we have authorships, and these can impact people in different ways. And you cannot possibly screen people out for this unless robots somehow start grading these evaluations. The problem is that becomes the most important part. Jeremy's solution to evaluating our students or our school district isn't to look at the students and just to look at the teachers, and I have to agree. The problem becomes, as Jeremy says, that we're just looking at teacher essays. We need to look at students' performance, and the only way to objectively measure that is through these standardized tests. We are going on to the second point. He talks about a true test of knowledge. And this is going to contradict with his first theory, but he talks about that there's these different levels of knowledge and that we need to test at the middle for. And me and him agree to this. The problem becomes, as Jeremy says, that we're only testing facts with standardized tests, which is blatantly not true. We've all answered standardized questions that have said something like, why was World War II started? With all the different answers still being a description. It's not just testing facts. Math is an exquisite example, because you cannot solve for this comprehensive idea in math, because it's not about the skills. We're given a math problem, and we're giving a list of answers. We have to have the skills to get to that answer. And so you can see that these standardized tests are subjectively testing very efficiently this combination of all these subjects. And the list goes on, because we've all answered these types of history questions, say, why did this happen? Or what was the impact of this? And we see that that is inherent in standardized tests. And again, the rest of the theory, he thinks about memorization only. I just explained how it's more than memorization. It's still the methodology behind it. And he just says that's a low stage, but we're still testing the idea above that with the operational aspect. Then we go on down to the first part of his case, and he says the skills on evaluation, and he said it cannot be expressed. He doesn't give us any examples on anything that can't be expressed in a standardized test. He just says they can't be expressed. Which subjects is he talking about? He hadn't told us exactly why. And then he talks about there's a list that we need to test over music too. Again, when we're taking a comprehensive high school graduation exam, we do need to test over major subjects. I agree with Jory, but he hasn't showed us why essays are more beneficial than standardized tests. You go to why standardized tests are more important, and it becomes extraordinarily easy. We've already talked about subjectivity, but the answer he doesn't admit, or the drop that he makes in the round, is the second contention, talking about is a true test of knowledge, particularly subpoint B, when you restrict the amount of knowledge that can be tested. Because what we're supposed to learn over everything that we've learned throughout high school, I use history as the example. He says, well, we can talk about all aspects of World War II, but we learned so much more in history than just World War II. And if your graduation is dependent on only what World War II, then what was the point of learning about World War I? What was the point about learning about presidents? What was the point about learning about our political system? What was the point about learning any of that when he says that the only thing that you're going to be tested over is just World War II? And the problem is essays become extraordinarily restrictive in the amount of knowledge that truly can be tested. So what we do is we take an objective measure to measure more knowledge of what the student has and more facts and more skills, and the only way to do that is through standardized tests.
Ready, judges? Mr. Goss?
Ready.
Okay, once again, let me thank you all for being here. It's been a fantastic round today, and I'm sorry I get a little fired up when it comes to education. It's my passion in life. So to the judges, thank you for bearing with. To the audience, thank you so much for being here. Alex, I hope I look good in front of the camera, because I'm sure this is going to haunt me for the next 15 years when they try to teach other novices. And Mr. Goss, thank you so much for setting up an excellent case. Having said that, let's go through, and I'm going to go down the affirmatives case first and talk about some of the things he just said, pointing out some key drops in my case then, and then finally leaving you with a little donor. So first, let's look towards this whole part of the fact that we live different lives, and if your dog died, well, it's going to influence you in certain ways. The problem here is professionalism. We don't pull people off the street and simply say, hey, you go read this paper and tell us what you think. These are educators. They are trained professionally, as I told you, to look at these essays and evaluate the skills within them and then see what happens. I'm not going to break down into tears because my dog died and then think, oh my God, that's terrible, and I need to give this person a passing grade. There's no logical jump there, because these people are trained to go, well, my dog died, that is sad, but let's look at this student's writing and truly figure out if he's captured the skills that he needs to know in order for him to pass this. Professionalism is something that we can easily get rid of bias with, and even if there is some bias, they're still trained to evaluate. I'm sure you all judges have your own personal bias in life. You've lived your lives one different way. But we expect you to come into this round, the whole time we expect you to come into this round without that bias, to set aside your personal lives, and then tell us who did better in this round alone. The fact that you are judging and we trust you with this victory is the exact same thing that Mr. Goss is saying we cannot do with our students, but you are professional, you are trained to do this, they are professional, they are trained to do this, therefore we clearly see that the negative is winning on that point. Then we go on to the next point about the evaluation of students. performance and standardized tests. But because he says, well, we can't really standardize and evaluate an essay. Yes, we can. I'm sure you're all familiar with what a rubric is. We can assign a standardized rubric to something and say, okay, he needs to meet these certain things in order to pass. Rank them on a scale of 1 through 5, 1 through 10, whatever it is. And if here's not satisfactory, give him a 7. If he's completely missing it, give him a 0. And each piece of the rubric, we hand everyone the standardized rubric. This problem is solved simply for that reason. In a standardized test, yes, the answers are the standardized rubric, but we can still do that with an essay. In fact, in a lot of teaching classes I've already taken, we are encouraged to write rubrics. In fact, must require a rubric for every single written essay that we have. So this is absolutely no problem to say that rubrics cannot be utilized here. And then going on to say that I dropped the second point. This is not true. I do give the fact about the true test of knowledge. I told you that directly comprehend. This is a direct contradiction with my first point on the negative off case. So that does actually attach the two together. But more importantly than that, he talks about World War II. And he says, well, if everything's going to fall into World War II, then we're not truly testing them. The problem is, like I told you, when he completely doesn't address this, we are teaching them the skills that they need. He says, math is an exquisite example of teaching skills. Yes, that's true, and I'll get to that in a moment. But we look towards World War II. If we're expected to tell the societal impacts of that, who started the war, how they started the war, how the battles went, what were the impacts, all of these things, we know that if they can do that with World War II, they can do it with the other wars because they know the skills to analyze the subject, to synthesize the subject, to put it all together, and actually give us an answer. This is why essays are more important. Then we go on to the next point about, he asks you, well, what is the impact? And we all had questions like that. That's a fact, because you're trained to know that the impact of X is Y whenever you're taking these tests. The teacher doesn't tell you something like, well, you need to figure out your own impacts. He tells you, okay, this is the impact that you need to know, memorize it, take it. And then why was World War II started? There are lots of reasons to that. There are societal reasons. There are reasons as far as military goes. Some people wanted certain things. We can talk about Hitler. We can talk about the other countries. We can talk about Italy. There are lots of reasons, and a standardized test isn't going to give you a list this long to figure out what the correct answer is. Why? Because it's trying to condense everything down into a simple fact, which I've already told you is not good for learning. Then we go on to my next, and we go on to the off case really quick, and he says we're unable to test all things. This completely contradicts the second point. The simple fact of the matter is that individual area exams, can really do this because, and then we talk about music and speech here, and he says, well, we need to test the base subjects with comprehensive exams, and I've not shown how the exams are beneficial. I have shown you that through the other point that he completely dropped. We need to look at the learning theories that Clayton does not dispute. He concedes that knowledge is the lowest level of learning, and comprehensive exams, as I told you, which he concedes as well, only test the lowest level. And then what we have to understand is that he also agrees in CX that we need to measure a medium. The medium levels are synthesis and evaluation. I'm sorry, evaluation is a higher level. But the medium level is synthesis, taking facts and putting them together. And a standardized test, it's a quick fire. What is this fact? What is this fact? What is this fact? What is this fact? And in an essay, you're given the facts and told them, synthesize these together. Give me one comprehensive example with all of these facts as to why this answer is correct. Give me this answer. This is that medium level of learning which he tells you we need to test. Therefore, the essay tests the best kind of learning for people who look at Piaget, which he also drops. The best kind of level of testing is concrete operational. The best way to do that is an essay, which only occurs in secondary schools. But when we measure the multiple choice test, we're basically giving them the optimal level of testing for an elementary school student and high school. This is not a good evaluation of learning, which is the main primary way schools do things. So once again, I urge a negative ballot. Thank you for your time.
Judges ready? Sweet. All right. Again, judges, this is the last time you have to hear me speak, so again, quick thanks to y'all. Thanks to everyone for being here. I told you Jeremy's phenomenal. This has truly been a great round. And so we appreciate y'all for being here. So what I'm going to do, judges, is to go ahead and clean up this last little speech for you and tell you Jeremy's major argument, show you how not only do I meet that argument, but I'm actually better at it than he is, and then I'm going to go ahead and give you voters why I feel very comfortable for in affirmative of today's round. Remember his last argument, he told you the most important thing to test is this middle ground. The major drop Jeremy makes is that I not only meet this, he says I conceded, I definitely conceded that middle ground should be tested, but standardized tests definitely tested. You look to the math example as your keen example that Jeremy does not address when I tell you that yes, we have a multiple choice format, but they still need to have the skills, not just the facts, to go from point A to point B, to go to that answer. So we are still testing them over skills. Now remember, judges, when we're using our weighing mechanism, you want to evaluate the very best possible way. Now, Jeremy has definitely shown you that maybe in some instances, essays could also test this knowledge. But what we need to see is that when standardized tests also, conclusively test that knowledge, we need to look at the flaws within the essay system. And you go to the first point to do that. This is what he says against that, judges. He says, well, we expect them to be professional. And he uses judges as an example. I'm a debater. How many times has a judge's personal bias lost me around? Y'all are debaters. How many times has a judge's personal bias lost y'all around? It's happened to all of us. And the problem is that we may expect them to be professional, but that does not mean that they're going to be. And the problem is that we cannot completely eliminate this bias. So let's go with a format that doesn't have any bias whatsoever. And that is a completely objective multiple choice grading system, especially when it does test the necessary knowledge. And you completely eliminate any chance of some personal bias being come in, because professionalism, unfortunately, just doesn't cover it. You go down to the second point, and this becomes even more, and probably the bigger voter in today's round, because we're talking about the amount of facts, skills, and knowledge that we actually test. The problem is that essays are extraordinarily restrictive, and Jeremy concedes this idea. He even says, well, if they can do this with World War II, they can do it with other wars. Judges, within our education system, we don't make assumptions. We don't assume that just because they know everything there is to know about World War II, that they know everything else about the Spanish-American War, the War of 1812, or anything else. We test them over that knowledge and over those skills. And the problem is, with the format of essay questions, they are extraordinarily restrictive. And that's exactly what subpoint B tells you, is that when they become restricted to only testing over one particular area, in all of history that we're supposed to have learned in high school, all of those skills and all of that knowledge cannot be boiled down to one essay question about one specific event in history. The only way to evaluate that knowledge objectively is through standardized tests. So when you're putting together that education system, you should go with one that not only tests knowledge and skills in that middle ground, but is also completely void of subjectiveness and tests over everything that has been learned. The only test that is a standardized test. So far.